That Rhetoric Guy. My last video was all about how individual rhetorical devices aren't particularly useful when analyzing a text because it's the large-scale strategies that teach us how and why a speaker does what they do. So why do we even have names for individual rhetorical devices? Why break up repetition into lots of different subgroups like assonance, consonants, alliteration, and all these others? Well, the answer lies in what exactly your task is. And this video will offer some insight into how different contexts or jobs may require the specificity that rhetorical devices provide. So first, we need to understand a bit about modes of writing. I've had a number of students in the past who, in trying to write a rhetorical analysis of a text, end up turning the essay into an evaluation of the text, or even an argument for or against the author's position. These mistakes come from a misunderstanding of why you're writing in the first place. Let's take a look at some reasons why you'd be writing at all. Rhetorical analysis. Analysis means to take apart, to disassemble something into its various pieces so that you might get a more coherent understanding of how it all works together. So a rhetorical analysis should really look like a lecture or a teaching tool. It shouldn't argue whether or not the author is correct on the substance, and it shouldn't be a book report that praises how awesome the author is or how boring the author is. It should be an objective look at how the language works. The author does X for Y because Z. Evaluation. This kind of writing isn't often used in advanced classes, at least in high school, because it's entirely about your personal feelings. This would be like a book review or critique where you offer your personal likes and dislikes. It's not a formal argument trying to change someone's mind, and it's not an analysis that teaches. It's just an informal position that you're just throwing out there. This was cool because X, and I like X. Argument. An argument requires certain things that analysis and even evaluation cannot provide. An argument is a conversation where you justify your position on a clearly defined, debatable topic, confront skeptics by defending your ideas honestly, and convince your opposition to rethink their stance or reasoning. The author is wrong about A because B, and therefore C is a better explanation because D. There are plenty of other kinds of writing, other modes of writing, plenty of other tasks and jobs that can be accomplished while writing. And all of them have their own objectives, methods, and restrictions. And that is one of the reasons why learning the nuances between different kinds of individual rhetorical devices can be so helpful. Second, we need to clear up a misconception that has its roots in standardized testing. No one cares if you know terms. Tests that ask you to identify terms are stupid tests. In real life, you can look up terms you don't know. A test that asks for that specialized knowledge is not a test of your ability. But this doesn't mean that the terms are what's wrong. It just means that the test is wrong. The terms still have meaning and usage. Think about why we have words that more or less mean the same thing, like happy and joyful. Well, the reality is that the more or less part is actually the critical part. That's what gives us the nuance, the small distinctions, the individual emotional alterations. They affect what we say, they affect what we mean. And this is why we have all kinds of different rhetorical devices and rhetorical terms. This is why we have all those different kinds of repetition, because they're used in different ways. They provoke different responses. They have different goals. They are nuanced. So let's realize that when we're learning rhetorical devices, that we're not learning this to just seem smart or for badly designed tests. We're using them so that we can make our own writing more specific, more effective, and more nuanced. All right, so now we're ready to actually take a look at a couple of rhetorical devices. What I'll do here is offer a few examples, making sure to note how the distinction between the terms helps me to become a better writer. Repetition is a common strategy we employ when trying to convince others. Repetition can overwhelm your audience, and that can be either effective or ineffective. So what kind of repetition you'd want to use, and how much you'd want to use, and where and when you'd want to use it, all of those things matter. Anaphora is one specific kind of repetition. It's when you choose to repeat a word or phrase at the beginning of successive clauses or sentences. Martin Luther King Jr. used this tactic often when he wanted to make personal or emotional points, such as in his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating "for whites only." We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. This repetition is significantly different in tone and application and effect and intent when compared to something like alliteration, which is also a kind of repetition, but a repetition of sounds in words close together, such as with Shakespeare's prologue in Romeo and Juliet. From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life. Notice how this kind of sing-songy sound has a poetic beauty to it, but would sound kind of ridiculous if you were trying to say something serious? Whether you can memorize the terms anaphora and alliteration is irrelevant. But if you can articulate their differences and use each in a context that maximizes their power, that's when you become a better writer. Another large-scale strategy we often use is one of inversion, to make opposite, to reverse. But just like repetition, there are a lot of different ways of doing this. Chiasmus is a specific grammatical structure that inverts the second of two parallel phrases. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. A to B, B to A. Irony is also a kind of reversal, but it isn't a grammatical reversal like chiasmus. It's a reversal of content or of expectations. I planned my wedding to be inside so we wouldn't get rained on, but while inside, the fire alarm and sprinklers went off, drenching everyone. Inverting your words with a grammatical trick like chiasmus can allow you to condense your point into something short and sweet. But that quick switch may not have the depth or power of a more abstract reversal, like the kind you get with an ironic anecdote. My last example here won't necessarily be tied to any great strategy, other than the recognition that sometimes we need to use more words and sometimes we need to use fewer words. Polysyndeton and asyndeton. Polysyndeton is where you add in a lot of extra conjunctions when you don't necessarily need them. As in, I searched everywhere for her. The store and home and the car, and I went to the school, and I even went to the police station. Whereas asyndeton takes those conjunctions out. As in, I searched everywhere for her. The store, home, the car, the school, the police station. Now, whether you can pronounce those words or not is, again, irrelevant. But if you can notice the pacing differences, how slow or fast they make you sound, if you can notice the tonal differences, how they reveal your emotional or mental state, if you can notice the different audiences that might respond better to one of those ways of talking over another, that is why rhetorical devices are so useful to study.